Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into this really fascinating Harvard Business Review article that totally flips the script on what a recession means. We're going to build a playbook for how to not just get through an economic downturn, but to actually come out the other side stronger than ever. All right, let's jump right in.
You know, for most of us, the word recession just brings this feeling of dread, right? It means demand is falling, budgets are getting squeezed, and there's just a ton of uncertainty. It's a time when pretty much every company goes into survival mode, just trying to hunker down and ride out the storm.
And look, that fear is totally justified. Research looking at 3 major global recessions found that a staggering 17% of public companies just didn't make it. They either went bankrupt, or forced into an acquisition, or had to delist and go private. They just couldn't weather that storm.
That is a tough number to even look at. But here's where the whole story gets really interesting. What if we've been looking at this all wrong? What if a downturn isn't just some threat you have to endure, but maybe, just maybe, it's a rare chance to leapfrog the competition?
Because that exact same research uncovered something pretty remarkable. A tiny group, just 9% of companies, didn't just survive, they absolutely flourished. They pulled away from the rest of the pack, outperforming their competitors by at least 10% in both sales and profits in the 3 years after the recession was over. So the billion-dollar question is, how on earth did they do it?
Well, it turns out their success wasn't luck at all. It was all about preparation. And the very first play in their book is about the money. It's about building a financial fortress long before the storm ever hits.
Harvard Business School's Rebecca Henderson puts it so perfectly. Rule 1 is, don't crash the company. I mean, it sounds so obvious, right? But this is the absolute non-negotiable foundation. Before you can even think about thriving, you have to make damn sure you can survive. And survival, above all else, means not running out of cash.
So, what does not crashing the company actually look like? Well, it boils down to 2 things: building up your cash reserves and, this is crucial, keeping your debt low. Just think of debt as this giant fixed cost you can't escape. You have to make those payments whether your sales are booming or have fallen off a cliff. Cash gives you flexibility. It gives you options. High debt, well, it takes them all away.
And you can see these 2 very different paths it creates. A study of the Great Recession found that the firms with the most debt were, by far, the most likely to fail. They were forced into these deep, painful cuts just to make their interest payments. But on the flip side, companies with low debt had room to breathe. They had flexibility, they could act opportunistically, and they recovered so much faster when the economy finally turned around. Just look at Amazon for a perfect example. In early 2000, they were still just a 5-year-old online bookseller. They raised a massive $672 million in cash. And just 1 month later, the dot-com bubble completely exploded. So while all their cash-poor rivals were vanishing left and right, Amazon had the resources not only to survive, but to actually expand, launching Amazon Marketplace later that year. I mean, that one move changed everything for them. Okay, so you've got your finances sorted out. The second play in the book is all about how you operate. And it really challenges a common instinct we all have in a crisis, the urge to centralize control.
I mean, think about it. When things get chaotic and uncertain, the natural impulse for leaders is to pull all the decision-making to the top, right? You want your most experienced people calling all the shots from headquarters. But is that actually the best way to go?
Well, the research says, nope. A study that looked at manufacturers during the Great Recession found something fascinating. The companies that performed better were the ones that were decentralized. The ones that gave more power and autonomy to their local managers were the ones who navigated the crisis most effectively. So what this strategy is really all about is matching decisions with expertise. A plant manager, for example, is always going to have better, faster information about their local customers and their local supply chains than some executives sitting in a faraway headquarters. So empowering that manager to act on that local knowledge makes the entire organization way more agile and way more responsive to conditions that are changing by the day.
All right, let's move on to our third play, which builds on this idea. This one is all about your most important asset, your people. When revenue drops, the first lever so many companies pull is layoffs. But the winners, they do things differently.
Let's take a look at Honeywell. See, during the 2000 recession, they laid off almost 20% of their entire workforce, and they really struggled to recover afterwards. So when the Great Recession hit in 2008, a much, much worse downturn, they knew they could not make the same mistake twice. So instead of mass layoffs, they got creative. They rolled out furloughs, giving employees unpaid or partially paid leave for anywhere from 1 to 5 weeks. This one single strategy saved an estimated 20,000 jobs. And the result? They kept their skilled workforce totally intact, they maintained morale, and they came out of the Great Recession in fantastic shape, ready to ramp up the second demand came back.
And that brings us to our final and maybe the most counterintuitive play of them all. This is where the companies that truly thrive really separate themselves from the ones that just, survive.
So picture this. Your sales are down, the future looks incredibly uncertain, and you're trying to conserve every single penny. What is the absolute last thing you would ever think about doing with your precious capital?
You invest. That's right. It turns out that downturns are an incredibly powerful catalyst for adopting new technology. While your weaker rivals are cutting back on everything, the strongest companies use the recession as an opportunity to become more digital, more efficient, and more data-driven.
And the logic here is really sound. First off, the opportunity cost is lower. When you're not running at full capacity, it's just plain easier to take time to upgrade your systems. Second, better tech and analytics give you a much clearer picture of what's actually going on in your business. And third, these investments often pay for themselves really quickly by automating tasks, cutting costs, and just making your entire operation more agile.
Okay, that was a lot to cover, so let's bring it all together and quickly summarize the 4 key plays that make up this Thrivers playbook.
So let's recap the whole playbook. Number 1, fortify your finances by getting rid of debt before a crisis hits. Number 2, empower your people by decentralizing your decisions. 3, preserve your talent with creative alternatives to layoffs. And finally, number 4, invest in technology so you can emerge from the downturn faster, leaner, and a whole lot smarter than your competition. History shows us again and again that every recession completely reshuffles the deck. It creates a new set of winners and a new set of losers. The companies that follow this playbook won't just be surviving. They'll be setting themselves up to lead the market for the next decade. So the only question left is, which kind of company will you choose to be?